course, Professor Lennox. Yeah.
This is fascinating, and I have a lot of sympathy, sir, with you. With what you said about institutions. In fact, I noticed that there's a sub-topic going on here, and I probably don't know enough about your culture to comment on it. But I come from Northern Ireland, gentlemen, where we know all about institutions and religious violence and everything else. So if I can speak from that perspective, you'll immediately see why I have a lot of sympathy with you in distinguishing between God and the institutions that claim to represent Him. I was very interested in what you said just a couple of shots ago, when you said that God as a person is not so compatible with faith in the modern sense, because it harks back to the old structure of authority. Now, I come from a country where, as you know, not at the moment, but in the relatively recent past, Protestants and Catholics have been locked in violence, and we've suffered from both sides. And just to make clear where I'm coming from, the interesting thing was my parents were Christian without being sectarian. They employed equally on both sides of that divide, and therefore I did not grow up with the sectarian bias. Secondly, my parents allowed me to think, which was very unusual in that context. That just explains a little bit why I'm very sympathetic with what you're suggesting. But what is very interesting in my mind is this, that I don't think the problem lies in believing that God is a person at all. I think the problem lies in not understanding that the principal thing is what you are talking about, sir, and that is the relationship with God existentially as a person. I would slightly formulate what you said slightly differently from my perspective, and suggest that God is not a theory, He's a person. And therefore, any institution will only imperfectly represent that. Now, when you say that I would want to claim from my perspective, you ask, the question is, what can we know about God? Now, I forget your names, gentlemen, they're very complex for me, but you, sir, I was very interested to hear you put limitations on what you might deduce from the natural world. And I sympathize with that as well. But I think actually the Apostle Paul would sympathize with you, in the sense that as we look at the created world, the deductions we can make about God are limited. And even the Bible recognizes that. The great Apostle Paul says, well, what can be deduced from the created world? God's existence, if that's how you translate theotokos, and God's power, full stop. You can't go much beyond that, and I think you're hinting at that. So, for me to know more about God, yes, I can tell something from the created universe. But for most of my knowledge, I must be open with you because this is an open discussion, I'm dependent on revelation, that the God who created the universe is a person and has revealed himself. The way he has revealed himself strikes me as the answer to the problem of the institutions. Because when I began to really do research into my Christian faith, I discovered that the violence in my country was not a result of obeying Christ, it was a result of disobeying him. Because he, of all people, said, my kingdom is not of this world, otherwise my servants would be fighting. Put your swords away. So it's not a result of following. The institutions have actually institutionalized disobedience to the original source of information about God. And the more I find in life, I go back to the original document rather than the institutions. I discover that that's a very liberating experience intellectually in every other way. But I have great sympathy for folks that associate the two and feel that there's a danger in both sides, the scientific hegemony of scientism and the authoritarian hegemony of churches that claim, of institutions that claim to represent God. So, to sum that up, I think that the natural world takes us some distance, but in one sense not a very big distance. I would want to look to other intellectual disciplines like A, history, and B, experience, to get further, to take seriously this question of whether the revelation that is in Christ is valid or not. Now that opens up a whole other perspective, but at least it positions, I think, where the situation lies as far as I'm concerned.
Maybe some commentary, please? No? Yeah? Please, Professor Emri.
I'm happy that we agree that we should go away from institutions. So we should talk about...
I didn't quite say that, sir. Institutions are bad. We're sitting in an institution at the moment. I just think we have to be careful.
But I would like to again emphasize that both science and religion are creation of humankind. So we created both worlds. And the aim of religion and aim of science is completely different. Aim of religion is to give explanation to everybody, to people that are essentially not capable of comprehending science. See, when I teach the course on mechanics and I come and tell students, force doesn't exist in nature, time doesn't exist in nature. How many people can comprehend that time doesn't exist? See, maybe we can memorize that, and we can make exam by repeating things, because our brain is incapable of distinguishing knowledge from information. So we memorize things and we believe that we know. But that's not knowledge, it's just information. So knowledge, see, that's a very, very, very known statement from Richard Feynman. He was a Nobel Prize physicist. He said, knowing something is being capable of reinventing it if it wouldn't be known. So it means you know only those things that if you sit in front of an empty computer, whatever you can type without looking into anything, this is what you know. Everything else is just have information. So if I go back, why religion shows God as a person? Because that everybody understands. If you would try to explain God in terms of high energy physics, how many people can understand it? Bro, I don't. See, thinking in 9 dimensions, I have a good friend, he's Professor Schwartz from Caltech. He works on superstring theory. He can think in 9 dimensions. I cannot. I cannot see things in 9 dimensions. He can. See, this is why comparing in the way probably we are trying to do that, religion and science is unfair. The role of the science is not to bring it close to every person. You either understand science or you don't. If you don't understand, you have 1 in physics, in elementary school and in high school. See, you don't get 1 in the church. See, in church, everybody is welcome. So the purpose of religion and the purpose of science is so far apart that thinking of competition is wrong by definition. Of course, again, if you talk about anything that comes, you know, the people that killed in the name of religion, people whatever, institutions, whatever, that's a different thing. But we cannot explain things, many things, starting with Big Bang. With science, we just name it. We said that's Big Bang, it's creation, whatever, I don't know. Maybe creation, what is wrong? What's the difference if I call that God? Name, I have a good joke. See that 2 guys can say that and say, you know that Iliad was not written by Homer. I said, really? Well, it was written by another person with the same name. So if we get rid of the name God, and we cannot, because dot is the reverse of God. So even if we erase the word God, it will be still there, but just you can read it in the opposite direction. Dot, God, it's the same letters. So I think both religion and science is something that we need. And I'm not religious, I have to emphasize, I'm atheist in principle. But in the sense of classical theology and classical religion as it exists. But at the same time, I think as a scientist, I cannot explain many things. And if you need an answer, either you say, I cannot, and let's see if somebody else can, or you try to explain this with religion. I don't need maybe this explanation, but many people need not just that, but they need religious explanation for things that maybe I can explain in a scientific way. But that's just matter also of knowledge and understanding of science. But I cannot explain many things in the standpoint of religion. So to conclude, I think these are two counterparts of our being, and we need both.
Can I make 2 quick points?
Yes, please.
The first is a correction, sir. Your argument is with my publisher, whose design is in any way is not my idea.
I'm sorry.
It's not in the book, it's on the book.
Oh, it's on the book. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
The second point is, are you arguing, as I think you may be, and I agree with you, for humility in science? Feynman I find very interesting, because when I learned Newton's law of gravity at school, I thought that was an explanation of what gravity is, but it isn't, of course. Nobody knows what gravity is. And I believe one of our colleagues is an expert in Wittgenstein, so I better be careful how I quote this. But I think it was Wittgenstein who said the greatest delusion of the modernistic concept is that the laws of nature are explanations of the phenomena of nature, when they're not, they're just descriptions. And that's as strong. We don't know what time is, we don't know what energy is, and I wish I'd been taught that at school, because I think it leads to the kind of humility you see in a Richard Feynman. There are so many things that we just do not know.